Hey, good Thursday morning, Georgia. It's time for Community Focus. We do this every Thursday morning as we travel around the state, Faith, and visit with different cities and what jewels our cities are across Georgia. And today we're in Peachtree Corners.
We are, yes. It's a beautiful place. I got to visit Peachtree Corners earlier this year because of you, Commissioner.
Yeah, we did our roadshow, Clean Energy Roadshow there. And, my wife, Wendy, taught at Beaver Ridge Elementary over in Norcross. And Peachtree Corners, we're going to learn today, they've been around for a while, and it's been quite a unique area, even before they officially became a city. But let me just say hey to everyone here today. In our last segment today, we'll talk with David Neal. David, welcome, and thanks for all you're doing with kids.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
We always have an emphasis on human trafficking and the blight that it is, and all the effort that goes into helping survivors, helping kids kind of be ready to see what's out there to protect them. Law enforcement. We've got so many moving parts on it. So thank you. We've got our good citizen today, John Hester, and I met John because he reached out. John, and you've actually been very successful in your efforts at being a good citizen, and you've helped a whole lot of people in your area. So we're going to hear that story today. Thank you for being on.
Glad to be on. Thanks, Commissioner.
Yeah, we may have Brandon Branham with the Curiosity Lab. He's just adopted 4 kids, and we'll see if he is able to join us today. But if not, the city manager, Brian Johnson, is going to fill in. So let's move everybody to the green room, and we're going to talk to Brian, the city manager. Brian had a chance to, come to your city, do the Clean Energy Roadshow, do my radio show from your Curiosity Lab. I just want to say thank you for rolling out the red carpet out there for me.
Anytime. We'd love to have you back. We've upgraded since you were last here on the podcast studio. So anytime you're in the area, we'd love to have you.
Yeah, that's great. You've got Tech Park there. You've got that little autonomous corridor. And I jokingly said last time up there that it was the Silicon Valley of Atlanta, but they've actually given y'all a new name. Tell us about that.
We were on an analyst briefing, 6 months ago, and one of the analysts within, I can't remember which technology area, at the end of our discussion about Curiosity Lab, he was like, wow, you guys are have a lot going on. He was like, normally I think about Silicon Valley when I hear this stuff, but you can't really be Silicon Valley. However, you are in Georgia, peach orchard, maybe you're Silicon Orchard. And so it's kind of taken off from there. And, it's really more of not just us. There's a lot of other cities, especially in our area of Metro Atlanta, that are doing some pretty cool stuff in the areas of tech deployment and, development. And so we're not alone, but we certainly are, a large part of, if in fact we are accurately termed Silicon Orchard, we'll take it.
You think about that research triangle up there in North Carolina. If you made a triangle between Peachtree Corners, Alpharetta, and Sandy Springs and back, you're going to encompass an enormous amount of innovation and technology.
I would agree.
Yeah. Well, Tech Park, many folks, maybe they've veered off of 85 and they've come up Peachtree Industrial or Peachtree Parkway. Tell us a little bit about where Tech Park is today and some of the new businesses that are coming there.
Well, Tech Park is kind of really the genesis of this city. I mean, in the late 60s, a gentleman named Paul Duke, Georgia Tech graduate turned developer, took inspiration from something you just mentioned, Commissioner, Research Triangle up in North Carolina. And he decided to do something about what at the time was a brain drain of Georgia Tech graduates having to leave Metro Atlanta because there weren't enough tech jobs. So back in the late 60s, he came way up here. We're 20 miles from downtown, and it was probably way up here back then. And he started speculatively constructing office buildings only to fill them with tech companies. And over the year, and then he created, so over a number of years, he got successful enough. He created what was Metro Atlanta's very first technology park. That's Tech Park Atlanta. It has grown since the late 60s. It's over 500 acres now. It's got about 10,000 jobs in it. About 2,000 people live inside of this. And it kind of creates the core of our central business district in the city. And it's also, some significant stuff's happened here. The modem was invented here at Tech Park Atlanta for the world. I mean, the Hayes modem. The color printer was invented here. And Scientific Atlanta, which is now Cisco, was founded here. So it has, and we can talk in a little bit, but it continues to put its flag on some of the development and innovation in tech.
Yeah, the Curiosity Lab that you have, it's just such a unique facility where you've got you're encouraging innovation, you're making it available. There's just not many cities that have taken that step. Was it a difficult thing to pull off?
Oh, certainly we had to be sensitive because especially since we're using public infrastructure. So, Curiosity Lab is essentially the intermediate step of technology evolution. And by that, I mean, technology oftentimes gets introduced in a closed, controlled laboratory environment, and it gets tested there. So you don't have any variables, safety's not an issue, all that stuff. But when it graduates, that tech that does graduate from that, where does it go to get introduced to the public for the first time? And oftentimes we saw in our economic development research that we did that usually happened in a place that was a temporary arrangement between a company and a public organization to say, hey, we want to temporarily use your public infrastructure to kind of do this thing for this, finite period of time. Well, what it ended up being is more of like a round peg into a square hole. It kind of worked, but it wasn't ideal. So we decided maybe we can actually create that intermediate step. And you come here after tech graduates from a closed lab. And if you can graduate from Curiosity Lab, then you are ready for, say, Midtown Atlanta. But you can't go from a closed lab to Midtown Atlanta in one jump. You got to come here. You got to go to an intermediate step first. So we decided to create it. We took public infrastructure. We improved it, leveraged it to get companies to come here. So now we have created a 3-mile advanced and autonomous vehicle test track and city street of the future. And you can test everything from mobility to cybersecurity, IoT, smart city, whatever, but it's open for those to come in and it's not closed. Commissioner, you and Faith drove in on it when you came here the last time you were here. So it's a public living laboratory, but it is where technology comes to get introduced to the public for the first time. And we could spend all day, and some of the use cases, some of the really unique tech that has come through here because of that.
Yeah, I think about Atlanta Tech Village down in Buckhead. I think about the LA Clean Tech Incubator out in the Arts District in LA. In Silicon Valley, when I was out there, they had a co-working space that was kind of dedicated to innovation. And to me, it makes sense that you can be an accelerator or an incubator and take these businesses or these ideas before they're ripe, before they're fully mature, before maybe they can afford to sign a 10-year lease in Tech Park. You nurture them, get them to a place where they are grown up, so to speak, and then they can go over and be a fellow business in Tech Park. And so it really makes a lot of sense, Brian.
And, we know that just one building or one location is enough. We certainly have a 30,000 square foot building that, we do that kind of stuff. But Curiosity Lab is an ecosystem. It's more than just, one building or one road. So, yes, we certainly like the position that we've got with Curiosity Lab. And it has certainly paid off because we've had a lot of economic development because of it.
Well, we're bringing John Hester into the conversation. He's our good citizen. Faith, we always have a good citizen on because a lot of times good citizens don't really get credit where credit's due. And one of the things we like to do on Community Focus as we travel around the state is find that person and recognize them. Brian, you and I interacted over John's idea, and ultimately the city signed off on it. And John, tell us about the problem that you saw and kind of the steps you took to try to resolve it.
Well, it started in my neighborhood where we were getting frequent power outages. Sometimes it was just a few minutes, sometimes it was a few hours, but I ended up documenting with my neighbors that we had 30 power outages in our neighborhood in 2019 or 2019. And I thought, that's ridiculous. It was never like that when I first moved here. Something's wrong. And so, because of my background, I worked as a utility manager, energy manager for Turner Broadcasting for 20 years. I had contacts at Georgia Power. So I started to reach out to them. I said, is this right? I mean, who can I talk to in Georgia Power about this issue? And I also started to reach out to the Public Service Commission as well. I recognize that both Georgia Power and the Public Service Commission didn't have a mechanism. Well, I should say this. As I started to talk to Georgia Power, they were very responsive. I found out that it wasn't just my neighborhood. It was all the neighborhoods around me. They were all experiencing, thanks to social media, it's a lot easier now to kind of learn what's going on around you. I started to say a few things on social media, and gosh, it kind of lit up the Nextdoor social media app. And I said, okay, this problem is bigger than just our neighborhood. And so that's when I started to reach out to the city, because I thought the city needs to help us kind of promote this problem, because Georgia Power and the Public Service Commission are really just kind of geared up for individual complaints. If you make an individual complaint, Georgia Power will respond to you, but they won't, I'm afraid they wouldn't see it as a large issue, and the same with the Public Service Commission. And then you got involved, Commissioner Echols, and we started to make people realize, the people that mattered, that this was a bigger issue than just my neighborhood and just a few people were having some power failures.
Yeah, ultimately, the city, Brian, you guys evaluated this and you determined, if we can improve this, we're going to have happier residents. And John's intervention kind of started the ball rolling on that.
Yes, he certainly got elevated this issue to a point where it wasn't just isolated and it wasn't just infrequent. It was a consistent problem. Georgia Power came back and said, hey, we, much like the city, we operate very much in precedent. And right now there are areas of the state that, have other, greater problems. We don't really have a way to deal with it. But, Mr. Hester and others, and then when you got involved, Georgia Power ended up saying, all right, this is a problem, and while we don't have a mechanism right now, let's create one. And they created, what do they call it? Enhanced Vegetation Management Program. And honestly, that is the real name of the program Georgia Power created after Commissioner Echols had a conversation with them to say, hey guys, we got to do something about this. And so it was a kind of a way to create an intermediate step between the one-off, individual customers, and then really large scale problems where they're burying lines, and they weren't ready to do that. So this is kind of an intermediate step between the two, because we all know that burying lines is the best when it comes to storm damage and wind knocking out power lines. But if you're not able to do that, was there another option? And thanks to, both of you, Georgia Power did. And then we work with Georgia Power to implement that program in the area that John, referenced earlier.
John, one of the things that was so compelling on this is that you were genuinely a winsome person. You weren't cussing me out. Not that there's, I guess, anything wrong with cussing me out, but you were kind. You were open to ideas. And then there was nothing like coming out there and riding through those neighborhoods and talking to people that really, I guess, made the problem ever so real to me. And and so, we were out there that cold, rainy day, and we walked the neighborhood. And before that, I rode the neighborhood with 2 Georgia Power engineers. And I think because that happened so seldom, that really made them think, okay, got a commissioner out here in Peachtree Corners riding around in a truck. This must be of concern. What do you think, John?
Yeah, and I can even add to my experience. I mean, first of all, thank you for your participation, because that made a huge difference, and you coming out and walking with us was huge. But I have to give kudos to Georgia Power's response, because even before you got involved, I got a lot of phone calls back from Georgia Power, and it was interesting. I was on the phone with one of the vegetation guys, the tree guys, and they said a lineman is going to come out and talk to you. And just as I hung up the phone, my doorbell rang, and there was a lineman in my driveway with his huge truck. And of course, I got some stares in the neighborhood. But then he took me for a ride, and we talked. And he was very out. He said, your problem is trees. People need to let us cut down some branches and stuff. And he started to show me, and it illuminated the problem. It made me realize that, well, first of all, great response from Georgia Power. Again, very, very responsive. And it made me realize that they just needed to catch up on some of their tree management, because that's exactly what it was. We had so many beautiful trees in Peachtree Corners that have grown over the past 30 years that I think they lost track of where they all were and needed to catch up. So that was it was great from the grassroots standpoint, from the responsive standpoint, between both you, Commissioner Eccles, and the Georgia Power folks, and the city, Mr. Johnson. So it just took everybody to realize that this was a bigger problem than just a few individuals complaining about their power going out.
So, John, we kind of had a test of this during that winter storm, and I know you reached out to me and said, "Hey, guess what? I didn't have an outage or something like that." What happened during?
It was I don't know. It was the winter storm, or it was a big storm we had, I think, in late summer. And I remember my Facebook page. We have a neighborhood Facebook page, and it was lighting up. Okay, everybody, get ready. We're going to lose power tonight. And it had become a joke, which is what we wanted to stop, right? So the next morning, the Facebook page even lit up more. Wow, we didn't have a power failure. Gosh, John, thanks for what you did. I had a couple of phone calls, and I said, well, I've got to share this with Commissioner Eccles and Georgia Power, because it's not very often you get Facebook not complaining about something, but actually happy about something. So that, I thought, was a watershed moment to show that we made an impact.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Faith, is here at my office, and she fields a lot of initial calls that come in. Of course, we take comments from all over social media, different things. Any way a person can reach out, we want to try to respond to them, and we can't always have the exact result that we had in Peachtree Corners, but we try. Sometimes people, maybe they're asking for something that maybe is too expensive or impossible to do at the time, or we have to stagger it, but we take them seriously, right, Faith? I mean, you get these calls, and it's an important part of our job.
Oh, absolutely. It's a huge part of my job. And John, I just want to thank you for reaching back out to the commissioner and telling him it worked. Because a lot of times we don't get that feedback. We just get people who are upset and need a problem solved. And it's really nice to find out that the solution worked and that they're no longer upset, and that their services are functioning like they should. You pay for those. They really should be functioning the way that they're designed to.
Well, I'm glad to do that. I learned one thing in after being many years in the corporate world: if you don't communicate very well, then you don't get much done. So
that's right.
Yeah, the squeaky wheel gets the WD-40. I tell people, look, everybody that contacts me, I try to help them. But if they don't contact me, I can't help them. I need to hear from them. Well, thank you, John, and thank you, Brian. We're going to bring on another one of your neighbors now, and Faith's going to talk with David about the efforts to fight human trafficking. So welcome to Community Focus.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
David. So David, tell us a little bit about Revved Up Kids, how you guys got started, and what you do.
Okay. Well, the singular purpose of Revved Up Kids is to protect children from sexual abuse and exploitation. That is our singular mission. And we do that by providing training programs to children and teens, educational seminars to their parents. And we do that. We can do it virtually, we can do it in person. And we start as young as 5 years old.
Mhm.
And we have training programs for elementary age children, middle school, high school, and we go all the way up to college age girls.
That's fantastic. So I used to be a forensic interviewer, and I know that, 5 seems very young to start introducing the dangers that are around these kids. But I know from experience as an interviewer, I interviewed kids as young as 3, and only that age, because that's the first age that they can really express what has happened to them and that they can really verbally communicate. And we know that it happens much younger than that. So I love the fact that y'all's perspective is to empower the kids themselves to protect themselves and to be aware and to have that empowerment. So tell me about some of those trainings that y'all do.
Okay. We really focus on 3 things. We focus on helping the children to understand who these, what we call unsafe people are, who they might be, how to recognize if someone might be unsafe to them, and then also how to stay safer every day. We call them their everyday, safety skills. And then they have emergency safety skills as well. If something were to happen, if someone were to try to grab them or take them or hurt them, so they can get away from this person. And then we really reinforce that if anything like this ever happens, tell a trusted adult. Tell a trusted adult. And so you can get help and, it doesn't happen again. And we have some children say, well, what if I tell my trusted adult and for whatever reason they don't believe me? Then tell another trusted adult. And you keep telling until someone helps you. And so it is empowering the children to know that they're smart enough and they're strong enough to be safe, and giving them the right to do that.
And then the trainings that you provide for the adults in their lives, for specifically their parents, do you teach the parents how to respond if their child discloses something like that to them?
We do on a small scale, but there are a lot of great organizations in Georgia, all over Georgia, that are really well equipped to help with that. Our goal with the parents is to teach them how to keep their children safe, whether that's in the real world and also online. For example, we're doing a training session for parents over in Cobb County today called Social Savvy, and it's all about keeping their kids safe online. So it's not just the person who is down the street or whatever, but it's also online, that we provide material and training programs for both kids and parents to stay safe.
When I was a kid, my generation, what we were taught was stranger danger, which certainly you want to teach your kids not to get in a stranger's car, but that's not where the majority of the danger lies anymore. Really, even not then. So I love the way you phrase that there are not safe adults and safe adults, that it's similar to the language that we used in forensic interviewing. We didn't use good touch, bad touch anymore. That's outdated. We use touches that are okay and touches that are not okay, because kids are more open to that kind of language and to communicating in that kind of language. So you're our human trafficking guest. We always focus on human trafficking. So tell me what the intersection is between what you guys do with kids and the human trafficking aspect.
Sure. We know there's a direct continuum between children who have been sexually abused and trafficking victims. And, the percentage we know is above 80%.
Mm-hmm.
And so our focus is on the prevention side, which is why we started 5 years old,
Mm-hmm.
because the best, I guess you could say, target for a predator is a child that doesn't know predators exist.
Yeah.
And so by educating our children and on who these people are and how to recognize if someone might be unsafe to them, that gives them tools in their toolbox
Mm-hmm.
to protect themselves, whether, again, they're out in the world or they're online. Because we know that the traffickers are now using social media more and more to try to lure kids
Mm-hmm.
into the world. And so helping children to understand those dangers and to be able to even recognize the dangers online will help to keep them safe. So it's all about prevention for us. There are so many great organizations in the metro Atlanta and all over Georgia who work with survivors,
Mm-hmm.
people like yourself who do the forensic interviewing to get to point where they can, arrest the perpetrators. So our goal is all about prevention.
Yeah.
But if we can prevent sexual abuse from happening, we can lessen the incidence of trafficking
Yeah.
in later life.
And I think that stat is really important for people to understand. That 80% is that roughly 80% of people who become trafficked were sexually abused as children. And those are separate events. And that when a child is abused like that, it breaks all kinds of healthy boundaries for them and makes it so that they don't know how to set boundaries for themselves. And I think that's a huge part of what you guys do, is to empower kids to set their boundaries and to keep themselves safe and to keep their healthy boundaries in place. And I really appreciate the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you.
So let me bring everybody back in and say thank you so much for coming on with us today. Peachtree Corners seems like a wonderful, lovely place. And I hope I can get back up there very soon. Sounds like we'll probably be doing additional things up there with the city, Brian.
Yes, absolutely.
So next week on Community Focus, we will be in Monroe. And then but that's out closer to me. And then the week after that, we'll be down in Albany. So we'll be all over the state in the next couple weeks. And just want to say thank you again for coming on with us, and appreciate the work that you're all doing.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.